Coming up, Navajo weaver Naiomi Glasses is the artist in residence for the fashion brand Ralph Lauren. We continue our coverage on the major changes to the federal law helping to return Native ancestral remains and cultural artifacts. And for Women's History Month, we uplift a community member helping women in need. Join us for those interviews on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
We begin our newscast today with a special series on the latest developments surrounding the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, better known as NAGPRA. New rules examine how museums handle Native ancestral remains and artifacts. Stewart Huntington begins our coverage exploring the impact of these changes and how they're shaping the future.
The new rules sent museums across the country scrambling to hide some indigenous items from public view as officials worked to comply with changes to the law.
We've been living with the regulations which were originally passed in 1995, and they've been horrible. They didn't even define the term consultation, so institutions have been able to use the past regulations to really just absolve themselves of any responsibility under NAGPRA. So these brand new regulations that went into effect on January 12th are a complete change. They're a sea change from what the regulations were.
The new regulations, published in the Federal Register, mandate a fundamental shift in priorities at institutions. The Field Museum in Chicago and the Peabody Museum at Harvard have blocked off exhibits. The American Museum of Natural History in New York closed 2 major halls. Right behind me here used to be the entrance to the Eastern Woodlands and Great Plains halls. They are both now closed to the public.
There were about 1,600 objects that fell into the category of either funerary object or sacred object or cultural patrimony. And it really felt appropriate both because of the scale of the objects that were there, but also because those were halls that were not consistent with our current framework and expectation about how Native voices are included in the narrative and the story. So we made the decision to close 2 of our halls.
So a lot of museums are like freaking out. They're looking around and saying, we better take this stuff off of display. Some of this has a question mark. What if it's determined that this actually is funerary related? We could be in trouble. And so there have been some museums that have taken things off of display, and there have been quite a few that have been re-examining their inventory and making sure they have done their due diligence to communicate and even understand their own holdings.
NAGPRA was passed by Congress in 1990 to protect Native graves and ensure repatriation of remains and cultural patrimony through consultation with tribes, Native Hawaiians, and Alaska Natives. But the law lacked teeth. Institutions held on to remains and items using terms like unaffiliated or unidentifiable. Native peoples have long complained.
Institutions were simply declaring collections of ancestors and their burial belongings as unaffiliated, even though there was information in the record. Even just geography is enough. And so the new regulations not only close that loophole, they do away with the term of culturally unidentifiable. And the institutions who created those culturally unidentifiable lists are going to have to go back and actually do the consultation that they were supposed to do to begin with.
In addition, the new rules give deference to indigenous knowledge, a critical change. and they require public organizations to obtain free, prior, and informed consent from tribes before exhibiting cultural items. They also set a 5-year deadline for compliance.
We're really excited to see the work that's going to be done under these new regulations. We hope that institutions will finally get the drift of what they're supposed to do with NAGPRA. For the longest time, they simply sat on their hands. After all, they are the ones who are in possession of stolen property. They are the ones who have the legal obligations under NAGPRA.
Stewart Huntington, ICT News.
As of January, nearly 100,000 Indigenous remains were still being stored in public institutions across the country. Recently, I visited one such institution in Ohio.
I'm standing on the campus of the Ohio History Connection in Columbus, Ohio, the home of the country's largest public collection of Native American, Native Hawaiian, and Alaska Native human remains. The organization and associated museum is headquartered in the building behind me. But the more than 7,000 ancestors' remains held by the Ohio History Connection are stored in warehouses nearby. Concerned about theft and vandalism, Ohio History Connection leaders wouldn't allow ICT News to film these buildings. The remains have languished here for decades, but recent changes in the federal Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, have placed a 5-year deadline for museums and public institutions, such as the Ohio History Connection, to repatriate ancestors' remains to tribes.
Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Brian Newland.
My name is Brian Newland. I am a citizen of Bay Mills Indian community.
Says the new rules are long overdue and will help us, quote, heal from some of the more painful times in our past. Native leaders agree.
I think we all have heard these issues for generations. These are the things that our grandparents talked about, and this is something that we can do. You know, I think I don't know many families that would leave their relatives somewhere.
When we do things like repatriate the ancestral remains of Indigenous people, is we enhance everyone's humanity. We make it more possible for all of us to get along with one another.
Under the new NAGPRA regulations, Indigenous peoples will have the final word on the affiliation and disposition of the nearly 100,000 of their ancestors' remains held by institutions throughout the United States. In the past, organizations like the Ohio History Connection were the sole arbiters of which tribes, if any, had legitimate connections to these vast collections. By claiming that most remains were unaffiliated or unconnected to contemporary tribal groups, the institutions were legally allowed to keep ancestors in their collections to be used for research or other purposes. As of January 13, 2024, however, the supremacy of the Western worldview, at least in archaeological terms, has officially been put on notice.
Without a doubt, repatriation is more than a healing exercise. I think it really does something to change the power dynamics and also change public perception about who contemporary Native people are.
I don't know that America really understands how big this issue is.
Marionette Pember, ICT News.
The new rule is a sea change.
It completely eliminates an institution's unilateral power over these collections and brings in tribes.
Many museums have shuttered displays rather than fall afoul of the new rules. But not everyone was caught flat-footed. 2 years ago, the American Museum of Natural History completed a 5-year overhaul of its 125-year-old Northwest Coast Hall. Steered by Native guest curators, the project perhaps lights up a healing and positive way forward.
That's a hall that was renovated about 2 years ago with real deep consultation and collaboration with representatives of tribal communities, with consulting curators who were brought in, a process that reviewed objects. One of the outcomes of that review is that some objects were repatriated if determined in the consultation that it was most appropriate for them to be repatriated.
It's earning good reviews from important quadrants.
So many Haida from Haida Gwaii Alaska, Seattle, wherever they are going to New York and making a point of going to the American Museum of Natural History to see the Northwest Coast Hall, to see themselves in it. Our people love to go there, and I think that's the ultimate test of whether the hall is good or not for us. And the hall is good.
Getting there proved bumpy.
You know, it wasn't without conflict, but we have mechanisms to address conflict. The conflict is important. You don't learn, you don't grow unless you can talk through differences, hey?
I think we were able to reach, points of agreement, common perspective, and, that produced an exhibit that we're all very pleased with.
That perhaps lights a healing way forward.
Yeah, I think we can get there. We know we've done it in the past, and we know we can do it again.
The hall was renovated with
deep input into how things are displayed, sensitivities around what could be displayed next to what, or what the framework or what the construct around the display would look like. And to me, that's actually the model of not only what this work should look like or what the product should be in terms of an exhibition hall, but really what the process should be in terms of collaboration between the museum and communities.
The Ohio History Connections Museum in Columbus is also looking forward. As part of a 2020 expansion, it reached out to area tribes.
The decision was made to expand this, and partially because of the need for that expansion, we had this opportunity to bring in more voices.
That inclusivity is now the law of the land, but it's always been just plain good practice, say Indigenous exhibit designers.
When we're getting into a new project, we put together first a committee within those Indigenous communities that we're touching. And we sit down with them, we visit with the artists, we visit with their historians, their elders. We allow them to shape the material that we then interpret and put into the exhibits that we create. In the end, there's something that's far more fascinating that comes out. Now that there's a law in place, I'm hoping that the museums start to figure that out as well. It's not their job to interpret our historical belongings. It's their job to allow us to take those belongings back and then allow us to tell the stories that go along with it.
Stewart Huntington, ICT News.
The entire series on the major changes to the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act is available at ictnews.org. There you can read more about these important issues and watch extended interviews. One day, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, Indigenous communities will likely look much different than right now. That's why we're launching a short series called Indigenous in 2024. Here we will interview the changemakers of today about their reflections, observations, and hopes. We start our conversation today with Naiomi Glasses. She is a weaver, model, and a skateboarder, and most recently you may have seen her work at a Ralph Lauren store. Naiomi, thank you so much for joining us today. We're so excited that you're here.
No, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
I want to jump right in and talk about your skills as a weaver. And I understand that this is something that has been in your family for a very long time. So tell us a little bit about your craft.
Yeah, weaving has been in our family for 7 generations, and I learned from my late paternal grandmother and my brother Tyler Glasses, and my brother, he got a head start on it, so I thought, oh, TJ's, we call him TJ. I was like, TJ's doing it and it looks so cool, and I was like, I want to be able to do that soon. So like I started helping, and then slowly I was weaving.
That is so amazing, and it's taken you to so many places. I don't know if you have the chance to really reflect on the career that you've built just on being yourself. Like, you have built a career off being a weaver and a skateboarder. Like, do you ever get the chance to really sit back and think about the success that you've had in that way?
I have had, I've had the opportunity to sit back and reflect, and it's just amazing seeing that these are dreams that I had while I was sitting at the loom, and I was thinking, oh, one day it would be cool to make blankets with my designs, and now I have the sackcloth and ashes blankets that I designed. Or, oh, it'd be really neat to see my designs on floor rugs, and now I have floor rugs on my website. And with the biggest one recently is being like, oh, I want to see my designs on clothing, and I recently released the Ralph Lauren Naiomi Glasses collection, so it's been amazing, really.
I want to actually learn a little bit more about your childhood, because we all had to start somewhere. So tell us what little Naiomi was like and sort of what her life was like.
So little Naiomi was just, I feel like I was so creative at that time too, but I didn't know how to weave. I wanted to weave at that time. And then at that same time, I was facing bullies at school because I was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate. So a lot of times when I get home from school, as soon as I learned how to skate, I would just go out and go skate around our cul-de-sac, because I grew up in Avondale, Arizona, which isn't too far from the ICT studios, actually. So I would go around and I would skate, and that's kind of how I found that love for skateboarding, because it became a place of solace and just a great place for me to be myself.
I'm so glad that you brought up bullying, because my sister is a teacher. A lot of the people in my family are educators, and they often tell me that bullying is something that really impacts Native youth. Mm-hmm. What is your message to young kids who might be going through bullying and maybe need a word of advice or feel like they're all alone?
My advice to those, like anyone going through bullying, is that you are so unique in that this may be a hardship right now, because that's what it was for me. Like, it was hard going through that. But once you get through it, it's gonna make you so much more strong. Like, it's gonna make you stronger, and you're so much more resilient in everything that you do. And it's like, I'm pretty sure that not taught me, but I feel like now that I'm older and I can reflect back on that, I know that was setting me up for what I do now and how to handle different situations.
I want to ask you, as a storyteller and as a weaver, what you see as the single most pressing issue impacting Indigenous communities in this day and age?
For where I live, so I live on the Navajo Nation, and I think it's so interesting that even in this day and age, in 2024, we still don't have water infrastructure, and we don't have running water. It's like, for myself, our family, we have to haul in our water and bring it into a septic system, and that's how we get running water. And so I think that's something that we really need to build a bigger discussion around, the water insecurity that a lot of people in Indian country face.
And when you think about the collective of Indigenous people in this country in 2024, what would you say are the greatest strengths? Like, what are the greatest, most empowering parts of being Indigenous today?
The most empowering part of being Indigenous today is seeing how many of my peers are just walking into spaces that Indigenous people haven't been before. It's amazing seeing that we have actors, we have models, we have chefs even, we have directors, producers. It's just amazing seeing the space that we're taking up, and I can't wait to see how that continues on from years from now.
I want to ask you about the future. I mean, it's really hard to imagine what else is on your list. You've been featured in CBS Sunday Morning, you've been in a Sephora ad, you've done the Ralph Lauren collection. Like, you have reached really, really high highs. But I want to ask you, do you have a dream project or a dream production that you want to work on?
Oh, wow. If you had asked me this a few years ago, I would have told you it was a Ralph Lauren project, honestly, because for the longest time I dreamt of working with them, and then it came to fruition within the last few years, and now finally released. So I think I'm looking forward to what's next. I can't wait to continue designing, and I'm super excited to share even more of my designs with the world.
Well, Naiomi, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for joining the ICT Newscast.
Thank you, Aaliyah. I had a great time.
Woolly-win. Thank you. Woolly is good. So woolly-win is thank you in a good way.
We are all children born of water. It is where all life begins. Water embraces and protects us. We revere it in our homes. We need to live close to water. It nourishes and cleanses us. All living things know this. Sometimes water is gentle and floats in the air. Sometimes water is harsh and powerful. Sometimes it catches the sun's rays. Water changes with the seasons, alive and always moving, even when no one is looking. Water is patient. Water endures. Water brings clarity. Water purifies our thoughts. Water brings us together. Water is holy. Water helps us heal. Water is medicine.
March is Women's History Month to celebrate the women who have made a difference in our lives and the lives of their native nations. Here's an encore presentation of an interview from our archives. Shirley Snavy interviews Natasha Kingbird.
Ushu Genua Queen Indigenous Cause Magazine in Dame Nesquagami Wiza Ikening Nindunjaba. My name is Natasha Kingbird, and I'm an enrolled member of the Red Lake Band of Chippewa Indians. So in community, I'm a community organizer, so I help organize the missing and murdered Indigenous women and people events. I'm also on the Violence Free Minnesota board, and I sit on the Northwoods Coalition Battered Women Shelter Board, along with like Minkasa.
I haven't done this in a long time. You guys must have been doing it different last time.
She started off here as a member of our organization, and she volunteered to do beadwork, and she was looking for work, and the only job we had available at the time was cleaning, and she showed up every day, great attitude, and she cleaned like you have never seen anybody clean before. She had so much pride in everything that she did. So we wrote this grant, and it was to expand our reentry program to serve Native women specifically. And Natasha just showed up. I think Natasha is worthy of this award because of all the great contributions she's made to her community. When she is speaking for the women she serves, she's walking right along with them, like her sisters.
Natasha Kingbird works with women who are leaving the prison system.
Our community is really just, somebody needs to believe in them. Like, I was
given that chance. Somebody believed in me, and just somebody to listen to. A lot of these things, that I've learned is really about like historical trauma and pulling our people back to their own roots and teaching them how to learn how to bead, sew, be in community, get their mothering skills back, and um, just learning tools to move forward so they can get out of poverty.
She is so committed to leading with her heart and with love and for giving back to her community. She doesn't know how to not see people with love. Approaching with love, do you know how different that is when we talk about the correction system? Then you have Natasha Kingbird say, okay, we're going to approach this with love. But the word love isn't used in public safety language, and yet I come here and understand what that means. That means leading with your heart.
I went in there a while ago, and there was a lot of emotional, just by them seeing us Native women going in there, like there was so many women that were emotionally like touched by that. And it just shows that they're needing, that space in there, or, continue to collaborate with people that are doing that work. I think about our youth and our families. There's so much out there that we could do, and just try to encourage people to remind themselves like, hey, there's so much out here you can be a part of.
Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.